Nocturne Academy was less a school than a gilded mausoleum, where the air was always 10 degrees too cold for human blood. The architecture was designed to dwarf you, a cathedral of shadows where the heavy velvet curtains didn't just block the sun, they suffocated the hope out of the room. It smelled of ancient dust and iron, the metallic tang of sustenance thinly veiled by the scent of industrial soap. Down here on the flagstones, the world was measured in inches of dirty water and the dull ache of cartilage grinding against stone. In a place built for predators, the only safety lay in becoming a ghost before you were dead, quiet, grey and utterly beneath notice. The stone corridors of Nocturne Academy exhaled cold like a living thing. Odelia Vane pressed her back against the wall, waiting for the echo of boots to fade before she dared move again. The bucket handle bit into her palm, water sloshing against the rim as she shifted her weight. 3 years she'd scrubbed these floors. 3 years of making herself small, invisible, a shadow that cleaned up after immortals who'd forgotten what it meant to bleed. Her knees ached from the flagstones. The soap had cracked the skin between her fingers again, and when she wrung the rag, pink threads of diluted blood swirled into the grey water. She should stop, wrap them. But the grand hall still needed finishing before dawn assembly, and donors who fell behind their quotas didn't get medicine allocations. Mother needed the medicine. The thought tightened like wire around her chest. Odelia dunked the rag again, the water so cold it burned. She worked in sections, methodical, her breathing falling into the rhythm of scrub and rinse, scrub and rinse. The hall stretched before her like a cathedral, all vaulted ceilings and stained glass windows that would blaze crimson when the sun rose. But the vampires would be safely coffined by then, and she'd be in the donor quarters, counting out Mother's pills, watching for the telltale fever that meant the rogue infection was spreading. Above her, a fresco depicted the first covenant, humans kneeling, vampires standing, the exchange of blood for protection rendered in gold leaf and lapis lazuli. Odelia had memorized every brushstroke. When you spent your nights on your knees, you learned the ceiling better than the sky. She was humming before she realized it. An old tune, something Mother used to sing when Odelia was small, before the infection, before the scholarship that was really just indentured servitude with a prettier name. The melody filled the empty hall, soft and aching, and for just a moment she let herself forget where she was. The boot struck the bucket before she heard him approach. Water exploded across the flagstones, the bucket clattering and spinning. Odelia's heart slammed against her ribs as she scrambled backward, her wet hands slipping on stone. The water spread in a dark stain, reflecting the vaulted ceiling above, and in that reflection she saw him before she dared look up. Cyprian Valerius stood with his hands clasped behind his back, head tilted like a predator considering prey. He wore the midnight blue uniform of the highborn class, silver buttons catching the lamplight, every line of him sharp enough to cut. His face was the kind of beautiful that hurt to look at directly, all elegant bones and cruel mouth, skin so pale it seemed to drink the darkness rather than reflect it. Scholarship donor. His voice rolled through the hall, cultured and cold. Do they not teach you that human noise pollutes sacred spaces? Odelia pressed her forehead to the wet stone, the prescribed posture of deference. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Forgive me, highborn. I didn't know anyone was... You didn't know? He moved closer. She could feel it in the way the air changed, grew heavier, though his footsteps made no sound. Or you didn't care. Which failure shall I report to the council? Her throat closed. A report meant investigation. Investigation meant they'd examine her records, her family, discover that Mother's infection had progressed past the acceptable threshold. They'd revoke the medicine, quarantine her, or worse. Please, the word scraped out. It won't happen again. Silence stretched. Water dripped somewhere, a metronome counting her heartbeats. Then Cyprian laughed, and the sound had edges. You have a voice. He circled her, and she kept her eyes down, watching his reflection ripple across the wet floor. Untrained. Common. But there's something. He paused. How long have you been scrubbing my family's floors, little donor? 3 years, highborn. 3 years of silence, and tonight you sing. His boot appeared in her line of vision, so close she could see her distorted face in the polished leather. Stand up. Odelia rose on shaking legs. Her uniform, grey smock, white collar, the red band marking her as donor class, clung wet to her skin. She kept her gaze fixed on his collar, not daring to meet his eyes. Up close she could feel the cold radiating from him, the absolute absence of human warmth. Look at me. She obeyed. His eyes were amber, flecked with gold, ancient and amused. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then his hand shot out, fingers catching her chin, tilting her face toward the lamplight. His touch was ice against her skin. Your mother, he said softly. Maestro Vane, Quarantine Ward, Section 7. Rogue infection, Stage 3. His smile showed teeth. Did you think we don't keep records? The floor seemed to tilt beneath her. Please, Stage 4 is terminal. Cyprian released her chin, but the cold imprint of his fingers remained. They'll withdraw treatment next week. Protocol. He turned away, examining his nails with studied disinterest. Unless, of course, someone intervened. Someone with influence. Hope and horror warred in Odelia's chest. What do you want? Want. He glanced back, eyebrows raised. What makes you think I want anything from a scholarship donor who can't even keep her bucket upright? But there was something in his expression, a calculation that made her skin prickle. He moved to the far wall where the Academy's artifacts were displayed behind glass. Ancient instruments, sheet music yellow with age, the relics of the vampire's obsession with human art. They could no longer create themselves. Their immortality had stolen something vital, some spark that died when the heart stopped beating. Cyprian pressed his palm against the glass, above a scroll bound in black ribbon. The score of ancestors, he said, written by the last human composer before the Covenant. It said that any vampire who hears it performed perfectly will weep blood. A pretty myth. His reflection smiled at her. No one's managed it in 3 centuries. The piece is designed to kill the performer, requires breathing patterns that collapse human lungs, sustained notes that rupture vocal cords. Odelia's mouth went dry. Why are you telling me this? Because you're going to perform it. He turned, and the amusement had drained from his face, leaving something harder, hungrier. At the autumn exhibition. In front of the High Council. That's insane. I'm not trained. I can't, you can. He moved toward her again, each step deliberate. Or your mother dies. Quite simple, really. The hall felt too small suddenly, the walls pressing in. Even if I wanted to, I'd need training. Access to the score. Permission from. I'll provide everything. Cyprian's voice dropped to a purr. Training. Access. I'll even sponsor your reclassification from donor to performer. Imagine your mother in a clean facility, real doctors, experimental treatments. He paused. All you have to do is survive long enough to sing, and if I don't survive, then I'll have the satisfaction of watching a human attempt the impossible. Entertainment is so rare these days. His smile returned, sharp as broken glass. Either way, I win. Odelia looked at the scattered cleaning supplies, the spilled water still spreading across stone she'd scrubbed until her hands bled. 3 years of invisibility, 3 years of swallowing pride and fear and rage, all to keep Mother alive another day, another week. And now this vampire, this beautiful monster, was offering her a chance wrapped in a death sentence. Why me? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Why not use a real performer? Something flickered across Cyprian's face, too quick to read. Let's say I have my reasons. Do we have an agreement? She thought of Mother's fever, the way her hands shook during the last visit, the hollowness in her eyes. Stage 4 was terminal. Protocol was absolute. This was no choice at all. Cyprian walked to the display case. The glass opened at his touch, biometric locks recognizing high-born blood. He lifted the scroll reverently, black ribbon trailing like a funeral shroud, and crossed back to where Odelia stood. The ancient parchment seemed to pulse in his hands, or maybe that was just her vision blurring. He held it out. "Take it," he said, "and we have a pact." The scroll was heavier than she expected. The moment her fingers touched it, heat seared through her palms, not the cold of vampire skin, but something older, angrier. A warning burned into the parchment itself. The pain brought clarity. This was really happening. She was really going to attempt the impossible, to sing the song that killed everyone who tried. Odelia lifted her eyes to meet Cyprian's amber gaze, saw the anticipation there, the cruel delight, and beneath it something else, something almost like desperation. "I accept," she whispered. His smile bloomed slow and terrible. "Then let us begin, little songbird. You have 6 weeks to learn how to die beautifully." The scroll burned in Odelia's hands for 3 heartbeats before the heat faded, leaving only the weight of ancient parchment and her own trembling. Cyprian's smile remained fixed, a predator's satisfaction, but his fingers twitched at his sides, the only tell that whatever magic had just sealed their bargain had affected him too. "The conservatory's west wing," he said, already turning toward the door. "Tomorrow at dusk. Don't be late, little songbird. Maestro Ignis doesn't tolerate tardiness, and he certainly won't tolerate weakness." The name struck her like cold water. Maestro Ignis, the reclusive composer who hadn't taken a student in 40 years, whose last protégé had allegedly walked into the sun after 3 months of study. The vampire whose compositions were said to contain frequencies that could shatter bone. Wait, but Cyprian was already gone, the door closing with a whisper that somehow sounded like laughter. Odelia stood alone in the archive room, surrounded by the ghosts of dead performers, clutching a death sentence wrapped in ribbon. The scroll's surface felt smooth now, almost warm like skin. She forced herself to unroll it. The notation was unlike anything she'd studied at the academy. Standard musical staffs, yes, but overlaid with symbols she didn't recognize, spirals and crescents, marks that seemed to shift when she looked at them directly. The lyrics were in Old Sanguine, the vampire tongue that predated the collapse, each word annotated with breathing marks that made no physiological sense. Hold for 12 counts. No human lung could sustain that. Descend 3 octaves in a single phrase. Impossible. She rolled it back up before the impossibility could paralyze her completely. The walk back to her dormitory took her through the academy's night gardens, where bioluminescent flowers bred for vampire aesthetics cast everything in shades of blue and violet. Other students passed in clusters, their laughter sharp and careless. None of them were bargaining their lives for medicine. None of them had mothers slowly turning feral in quarantine. Her room was exactly as she'd left it. Narrow bed, practice mirror, the stack of theory texts she'd been studying before Cyprian Valerius, had turned her world into a countdown clock. 6 weeks. 42 days to master the unsingable, or watch her mother's humanity drain away completely. Odelia set the scroll on her desk and stared at it until the sky outside her window shifted from black to charcoal grey. The conservatory's west wing had been abandoned for decades. Odelia knew this the moment she stepped through the archway at dusk the next evening and felt the temperature drop 15 degrees. The hallway stretched ahead, lined with practice rooms whose doors hung crooked on rusted hinges. Water damage bloomed across the ceiling in patterns that looked disturbingly organic. The air tasted of mildew and something else, old blood, maybe, or just the particular decay that clung to places where people had suffered. Her footsteps echoed. The sound bounced back wrong, as if the walls were positioned at angles that shouldn't exist in normal architecture. "You're 4 minutes late." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Odelia spun, heart hammering, and found Maestro Ignis standing in a doorway she could have sworn was closed a moment ago. He was ancient, not in the way Cyprian was ancient, all preserved beauty and predatory grace, but genuinely old, as if he'd stopped bothering with the illusion of youth centuries ago. His face was a landscape of sharp angles and hollow places, skin stretched tight over bone. Eyes like chips of obsidian watched her with an intensity that made her want to apologize for existing. "I'm sorry. Sorry is a human indulgence." He turned and walked into the practice room. "Inside, we have work to do, and you have already wasted time. I don't care to spare." The room beyond was larger than it should have been, another architectural impossibility. A grand piano dominated one corner, its surface so black it seemed to absorb light. The walls were bare stone, and someone had carved musical notation directly into the rock, phrases that spiraled up toward a ceiling lost in shadow. Maestro Ignis moved to the piano with the fluid grace all vampires possessed, but his was economical, stripped of showmanship. He sat, played a single note. The sound hit Odelia in the sternum like a physical blow, vibrating through bone and tissue. "Do you know why the hymn of eternal twilight kills its singers?" He didn't wait for an answer. "Because it was never meant for mortal throats. The frequencies are calibrated to vampire physiology, our denser bones, our stilled hearts, our lungs that don't require oxygen, but use it as a tool. When a human attempts it, the resonance tears them apart from the inside. Blood vessels rupture, organs fail. The fortunate ones lose consciousness before the real damage begins." He played another note, higher this time. Odelia felt it in her teeth. "You are not here to survive the hymn," Ignis continued. "That would be impossible. You are here to last long enough to complete it. To die on the final note, instead of the first verse. Do you understand the distinction?" "Yes." Her voice came out steady. "A small victory. We'll see." He gestured to the center of the room. "Stand there, feet shoulder-width apart. You're going to sing for me, and I'm going to tell you all the ways you're inadequate." She moved to the spot he'd indicated. The stone beneath her feet was worn smooth, as if countless students had stood in this exact place. How many of them had survived their lessons? "The scroll," Ignis said. "You brought it?" Odelia pulled it from her bag. He didn't take it, just nodded toward a music stand that materialized, or had it always been there, beside her. "Open it. First phrase only. Attempt it." Her hands shook as she unrolled the parchment. The symbols seemed even more incomprehensible now, writhing in the low light. She found the beginning, drew breath, and tried. The sound that emerged was thin, reedy, human. It died in the air before it could reach the walls. Ignis's expression didn't change. Again, She tried, failed, tried again. Each attempt felt like pushing against a wall that wouldn't move, her voice breaking on frequencies it wasn't built to reach. He rose from the piano, crossed to her in 3 strides. "You're singing with your throat. The hymn requires your entire body to become the instrument. Your ribs must be the resonating chamber. Your spine must conduct the vibration. Your blood must carry the sound." He placed one cold hand against her sternum, the other on her back between her shoulder blades. "Breathe, deeper, fill every space." She inhaled, his hands pressed, forcing her lungs to expand beyond comfort. "Now, sing from here." He tapped her sternum. "Not from here." A touch to her throat. "If you sing from your throat, it will tear. If you sing from your core, you might last long enough to matter." She tried again. This time something shifted. The note came out darker, fuller, and for a moment, just a moment, she felt it resonate through her bones the way his piano notes had. Ignis stepped back, almost smiled. Almost. Better. Barely. Again. They worked through the night. Ignis was merciless, stopping her mid-phrase to correct her breathing, her posture, the angle of her jaw. When she got it right, he moved on without praise. When she failed, he made her repeat the passage until her voice grew hoarse and her legs trembled from standing so long in one position. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, she tasted copper. Blood from somewhere in her throat or sinuses. Ignis noticed immediately. "Stop." He produced a handkerchief, black silk, because of course, and handed it to her. "That's enough for tonight. You'll rupture something if we continue, and I need you functional." Odelia dabbed at her mouth. The handkerchief came away spotted with red. "How long did it take your last student to reach this point?" 3 weeks. He began gathering sheet music, his movements precise. She was extraordinarily talented. She also died on the 4th verse screaming after her lungs filled with blood. The casual delivery made it worse somehow. "Why are you helping me?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "Cyprian said you were reclusive, that you don't take students anymore." Ignis paused, his back to her. For a long moment, the only sound was water dripping somewhere in the walls. "Cyprian Valerius is a fool playing games he doesn't understand," he said finally. "But the hymn deserves to be heard. And you," he turned, those obsidian eyes finding hers. "You have something, a resonance, raw and untrained but present. It would be a waste to let you die in the 1st verse." How comforting. "Comfort is not what I offer." He moved to the door. "Tomorrow, same time, bring water. You'll need it." He was gone before she could respond, leaving her alone in the practice room with blood on her lips and the echo of impossible music in her bones. The days blurred into a rhythm of pain and progress. Odelia attended her regular academy classes in a fog, her mind still in that stone room, still trying to crack the code of the hymn's inhuman frequencies. Her classmates noticed the change, the hollows forming under her eyes, the way she flinched at loud noises, the blood she sometimes coughed into her hand between lectures. Let them notice. Let them wonder. She had no energy left for maintaining appearances. Every evening at dusk, she returned to the West Wing. Every night, Ignis pushed her further, teaching her to breathe in patterns that made her dizzy, to hold notes until her vision sparked with black spots, to descend into registers that felt like falling through her own skeleton. "The hymn is a descent," he explained during their 2nd week, his fingers moving over the piano keys in demonstration. "It begins in the realm of the living, high, bright, full of mortal hope. But phrase by phrase, it sinks deeper, into shadow, into the space between heartbeats. By the final verse, you will be singing from the place where life and death meet. That is where humans break. That is where you must hold. She practiced until her throat was raw, until she could feel the vibrations in her bones even when she wasn't singing. The hymn began to invade her dreams, those spiraling symbols from the scroll appearing behind her eyelids, the frequencies humming through her sleep. On the 15th day, Cyprian appeared. She was in the practice room, working through the third verse, when she felt his presence. The air changed, grew heavier. She stopped mid-phrase and turned. He stood in the doorway, watching. How long had he been there? "Don't stop on my account," he said, moving into the room with that liquid grace. "I came to observe your progress. I wasn't aware I needed an audience. You have a contract with me, little songbird, that gives me certain privileges." He circled her slowly. Predatory. "Besides, I'm curious. Ignis says you're advancing faster than expected, that you have ancient resonance, whatever that means." Odelia's pulse quickened. She hated that he could probably hear it, that her body betrayed her fear even when her voice stayed level. "Where is Maestro Ignis?" "I sent him away. We have matters to discuss." The room felt smaller suddenly. Cyprian stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes, could smell whatever expensive cologne vampires wore to mask the scent of preserved death. "Sing for me," he said. "The third verse. I want to hear what you've learned." It wasn't a request. Odelia turned back to the scroll, found her place and drew breath. The air filled her lungs, expanded her ribs, and she let the sound rise from her core, the way Ignis had taught her. The note that emerged was dark and resonant, carrying harmonics that shouldn't exist in a human voice. She felt it vibrate through the stone floor, felt it move through the air like something alive. The phrase descended, pulling her down into those impossible frequencies, and for a moment she wasn't in the practice room anymore. She was somewhere else, somewhere cold and vast and older than memory. She finished the verse. Silence rushed back in. Cyprian was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. Hunger, yes, but something else beneath it. Something almost like awe. "Again," he whispered. "No." The word surprised them both. "I'm not a performing monkey, Cyprian. If you want to hear the hymn, wait for the actual performance." His eyes flashed. For a moment she thought he might grab her, might let that carefully controlled predator slip its leash. But then he laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You're developing a spine. How delightful." He moved closer, and she forced herself not to step back. "Tell me, Odelia, are you doing this for your mother, or has some part of you fallen in love with the hymn itself?" The question struck too close to something she hadn't wanted to examine, because he was right. Somewhere between the blood and the pain and the impossible frequencies, she'd begun to crave it, the way the music moved through her, the way it made her feel vast and ancient and more than human, even as it destroyed her piece by piece. "My mother," she said. "Always my mother. Leah." But he said it gently, almost fondly. His hand came up, fingers brushing her jaw. Cold, always so cold. "You're beginning to understand, aren't you? Why the hymn kills. It's not the frequencies alone, it's what they open, what they let in." "I don't know what you mean." "You will." He stepped back, the moment breaking. 4 weeks left, little songbird. I suggest you practice. The crypts, perhaps. Better acoustics. And if you happen to shatter a few windows, well, consider it a test." He left her there, heart racing, the ghost of his touch still cold on her skin. She took his advice. The academy crypts were forbidden to students, But Odelia had stopped caring about rules the moment she'd signed her death warrant. She slipped down after midnight, when even the vampires were occupied with their own affairs, and found a chamber deep enough that no one would hear. The acoustics were extraordinary. Her voice bounced off stone walls and vaulted ceilings, multiplying, harmonizing with itself. She worked through the verses, pushing harder than she dared with Ignis present, testing her limits. On the fourth verse, something happened. The note she sang was perfect, dark and resonant, and impossibly low. It filled the chamber, grew louder, and then the sound became visible. Ripples in the air, like heat shimmer, spreading out from her body in concentric circles. They hit the walls. The stone groaned. A crack appeared in one of the ancient pillars. Odelia stopped, gasping. The crack continued to spread, a thin black line racing up toward the ceiling. Then, with a sound like a sigh, a stained glass window high above exploded outward. Colored glass rained down, tinkling against stone, each piece catching the moonlight. She'd done that. Her voice had done that. Ancient resonance. Now she understood. She practiced in the crypts every night after that, learning to control the power, to direct it. Windows shattered. Stone cracked. Once, she made an entire wall weep, water streaming from between the blocks, as if the building itself was crying. The hymn was changing her. She could feel it in her bones, in the way her blood moved, in the strange clarity that came over her in moments of stillness. She was becoming something between human and other, a bridge between worlds. It was glorious. It was terrifying. And it was killing her, slowly, cell by cell. 3 weeks before the performance, Odelia received the message. It came via encrypted Academy mail, the kind reserved for emergency family communications. Her hands shook as she opened it. The antidote price had doubled. The pharmaceutical company, citing increased production costs and resource scarcity, had raised the cost to an amount that made her vision blur. Even with Cyprian's promised payment, she'd be short, significantly short. But that wasn't the worst part. The message continued. Your mother's condition has deteriorated. She has begun exhibiting stage 5 symptoms: photosensitivity, aggression, loss of verbal communication. Recommend immediate intervention or preparation for rogue protocols. Stage 5. The point of no return, when the infected stopped being people and became things that had to be put down for public safety. Odelia read the message 3 times, each word a nail in her mother's coffin. She had 3 weeks until the scheduled performance. But her mother had days, maybe hours. The practice room spun. She grabbed the edge of her desk, forced herself to breathe the way Ignis had taught her, deep, filling every space, using the air as an anchor. There was only one option. She had to perform tonight. Now, before her mother crossed the line into something that couldn't be saved. But she wasn't ready. The 5th verse still made her cough blood. The final descent into those impossible frequencies left her dizzy and disoriented. She'd need at least another week to have any real chance of surviving to the end. Her mother didn't have another week. Odelia stood, legs unsteady, and grabbed the scroll. Her fingers left bloody prints on the parchment. She'd been practicing so hard her cuticles had split. She had to find Cyprian, had to convince him to move the performance to tonight, to let her attempt the impossible before she'd actually learned how to do the impossible. The hallway outside her room stretched long and dark. Somewhere in the academy, vampires were attending their evening salons, playing their political games, living their immortal lives without urgency or fear. Odelia ran. The marble floors of the academy's west wing blurred beneath Odelia's feet. Her breath came in ragged gasps that tasted of copper and desperation. She'd never run like this before, not with purpose, not with everything collapsing behind her like a bridge burning. Cyprian's chambers occupied the highest tower. Naturally, she took the spiral stairs 3 at a time, her legs screaming protests she couldn't afford to hear. The stone walls pressed close, suffocating, and somewhere above she heard voices. His voice, smooth and unhurried, discussing something trivial with someone who had forever to waste. She burst through the door without knocking. The salon fell silent. Cyprian stood by the window, wine glass suspended midway to his lips. Lady Vespera reclined on a velvet chaise, her expression shifting from boredom to sharp interest. 3 other vampires she didn't recognize turned to stare at the gasping, bleeding human who'd just shattered their evening's entertainment. Odelia. Cyprian set down his glass with deliberate care. The performance isn't until tonight. Her voice cracked. It has to be tonight. Lady Vespera laughed, the sound like breaking glass. The little donor thinks she can dictate terms now. How deliciously presumptuous. But Cyprian's eyes had gone still, reading something in Odelia's face that made him move toward her. Your mother. Not a question. He knew. Of course he knew. He'd probably received the same medical alert, filed it away as irrelevant data while sipping his wine and playing his eternal games. Stage 5. The words came out broken. She has hours, maybe less. I need to perform tonight, or there won't be anyone left to save. You're not ready. His hand caught her arm, steadying her. His skin felt like marble, but his grip was careful. The 5th verse nearly killed you this morning. You coughed blood for 20 minutes. I don't care. I do. Something flickered across his face. Frustration, perhaps, or the closest approximation an immortal could manage. You think I've invested 3 months in your training to watch you destroy yourself before you reach the final note. Odelia wrenched her arm free. This isn't about your investment. This isn't about impressing the council or winning your political games. My mother is dying. Your mother is already dead. Lady Vespera's voice cut through the room like a scalpel. Stage 5 means rogue. They don't come back from that. Everyone knows it. The words hit like physical blows. Odelia's vision swam, but she forced herself to stand straighter, to meet Cyprian's gaze without flinching. Then let me try anyway. What do you lose? If I fail, you find another donor. If I succeed, she swallowed hard. If I succeed, you get your miracle. You get proof that the forbidden hymn works. Isn't that what you wanted? Cyprian studied her for a long moment. The other vampires had gone utterly still, that predatory stillness that meant they were listening with senses humans didn't possess. Finally, he turned to the window, looking out over the academy grounds where moonlight painted everything silver and cold. The grand hall, he said quietly. 1 hour. I'll summon the council. Lady Vespera rose from the chaise in one fluid motion. You can't be serious. She'll die before she reaches the 3rd verse, and we'll be left with nothing but a corpse and embarrassment. Then we'll have a corpse and embarrassment. Cyprian's tone held finality. But we'll also have our answer. Odelia didn't wait to hear more. She turned and ran again, this time toward the medical wing. She had 1 hour to see her mother. 1 hour to memorize a face that might not recognize her. 1 hour before she either saved everything or lost it all. The isolation ward smelled of antiseptic and something underneath it, something rotting and sweet that made her stomach clench. The nurse at the desk tried to stop her, but Odelia pushed past, following the room numbers until she found 247. Her mother lay strapped to the bed. The restraints were new. Soft fabric, but unmistakably restraints. Maria Vane's eyes were open, staring at the ceiling, and for a moment Odelia thought she was too late, that whatever made her mother herself had already fled. Then those eyes shifted, focused, found her daughter's face. "Delia," the voice was hoarse, uncertain. "Is that? Are you real?" Odelia crossed to the bed, took her mother's restrained hand. The skin felt hot, fever burning. "I'm real, Mom. I'm here. They said I'm getting worse." A tear tracked down Maria's temple. "They said I might not, that I could hurt someone. Could hurt you. You won't." Odelia squeezed the burning hand, felt her mother's pulse racing bird fast beneath the skin. "I'm going to fix this. Tonight. I'm going to sing the hymn, and it's going to work. And you're going to get better." Her mother's eyes cleared for a moment, sharp with the intelligence that had raised Odelia alone, that had worked 3 jobs to keep them fed. "Baby, you can't. It's too dangerous. I've heard the stories. I don't care about the stories." Odelia leaned closer, memorizing every detail, the grey threading through her mother's dark hair, the laugh lines around her eyes, the small scar on her chin from a childhood fall. "I care about you, and I'm good enough. I have to be." Maria's hand tightened on hers. "You were always good enough. Always." Even when her expression flickered, confusion bleeding through. "Who are you? Why are you in my room?" Ice flooded Odelia's veins. "Mom, it's me. It's Odelia." "Odelia," her mother blinked, struggled against the restraints. "No, Odelia's at school. She's studying. She's going to be something important. Not like me, not stuck in the quarantine zones." The words tumbled faster, more frantic. "Get out. You need to get out before the infection spreads. Where's my daughter? Where's I'm right here?" Odelia's voice broke. "Mom, I'm right here." But her mother wasn't listening anymore. She'd turned her face to the wall, muttering about contamination protocols and evacuation routes, lost in whatever maze the virus had built inside her mind. A nurse touched Odelia's shoulder. "You should go. The performance, I know." Odelia stood on shaking legs. She bent and kissed her mother's burning forehead. "I love you. I'm going to fix this. I promise." Her mother didn't respond. The grand hall had been transformed. Every vampire in the academy had assembled, hundreds of them, arranged in ascending tiers like a Roman amphitheater. The council sat in the highest seats, their faces carved from ancient stone and older cruelty. Maestro Ignis stood to the side, his expression unreadable. Cyprian waited at the center of the hall, beside a simple wooden platform. No ornamentation, no decoration, just a space for a human voice to either transcend or shatter. Odelia walked forward. Every eye tracked her movement. She could feel their hunger, their anticipation, their cold certainty that she would fail. Let them watch. Let them wait. She stepped onto the platform. The wood felt solid beneath her feet. Real. She closed her eyes, found the breath that Ignis had taught her, deep, filling every space, anchoring her to her body, to her humanity, to everything these immortals had forgotten. When she opened her eyes, she found Cyprian's gaze. He nodded once. She began to sing. The first verse came easily, the notes she'd practiced 10,000 times flowing like water. The acoustics of the grand hall caught her voice and amplified it, sending it spiraling up through the vaulted ceiling. She felt the vampires lean forward, felt their attention sharpen. The second verse required more. She had to reach deeper, find the resonance that vibrated in her chest cavity, that made her ribs ache with the pressure. Sweat broke across her forehead. She pushed through. Third verse. The hall grew warmer. Impossible, but true. She could feel it, could see condensation forming on the cold marble pillars. The vampires shifted in their seats, uncomfortable, uncertain. Fourth verse. This was where most singers failed. The frequency required was almost ultrasonic, scraping the upper limits of human vocal capacity. Odelia's throat burned. She tasted blood. But she'd practiced this, had coughed and bled, and practiced until her body learned what her mind couldn't comprehend. She hit the note. The sound that emerged wasn't entirely human anymore. It carried something else. Grief, perhaps, or love, or the desperate fury of a daughter watching her mother disappear. It filled the grand hall like a living thing, like a force that had weight and presence. The vampires began to weep. It started with the youngest ones, the recently turned who still remembered what warmth felt like. Tears of blood tracked down their perfect faces. Then the older ones, centuries-old creatures who hadn't felt anything in lifetimes, found their eyes burning with something they'd forgotten existed. Lady Vespera pressed a hand to her chest, her expression shattered. Even the council members sat frozen, crystal tears falling like rain. Odelia didn't stop. She moved into the fifth verse, the forbidden frequencies that no human should be able to produce. Her vision blurred, her body screamed, but she was past caring about survival. She was singing for her mother, for every human who'd ever been reduced to a resource, for the warmth and mess and beautiful mortality that these perfect creatures had traded away. The final note rose from somewhere deeper than her lungs. It came from her blood, her bones, her absolute refusal to let death win without a fight. When it ended, the silence was absolute. Odelia stood on the platform, swaying but upright. Sweat soaked through her dress. Blood trickled from her nose. But she was standing, glowing with exertion and life, and around her the immortals sat weeping like children who'd just remembered they were lost. Cyprian moved first. He climbed onto the platform, caught her before she could fall, and for once his marble skin felt almost warm. "You did it," he whispered. "You actually did it." The council rose as one. The eldest among them, a woman who'd been ancient when Rome fell, descended the steps with trembling hands. She reached out, touched Odelia's face with fingers that shook. "We had forgotten," she said, her voice breaking. "We had forgotten what it felt like to feel." Odelia found her voice, raw and bleeding. "My mother, does it work? Will she? We'll know within the hour." Maestro Ignis had appeared beside them. "The hymn's effects on the virus are immediate. If she's going to recover, the fever will break soon." They took Odelia back to the medical wing. She barely remembered the journey, only Cyprian's arms carrying her, only the whispered conversations of vampires who'd been reminded of their humanity. The nurse met them at the door to room 247, her face transformed by wonder. "The fever broke 5 minutes ago. She's asking for her daughter." Odelia pushed through the door on legs that barely held her. Her mother lay in the bed, the restraints removed, her eyes clear and focused, and unmistakably herself. "Delia," Maria Vane's voice was weak but certain. "What happened? I feel like I've been dreaming for weeks." Odelia collapsed beside the bed, took her mother's hand, cooler now, the fever burn faded. "You're okay. You're going to be okay. Did you sing?" Her mother's eyes searched her face. "I heard singing, even through the fever. I heard your voice." "I sang." Odelia's own tears came finally, hot and human and alive. "I sang for you." Her mother pulled her close, held her with arms that were weak but steady. "My brilliant girl, my brave, brilliant girl." Outside the window, dawn began to break over the academy. The vampires would retreat to their dark rooms soon, would sleep through the daylight hours. But for now, in this moment, a mother held her daughter while sunrise painted the world gold. And in the grand hall, crystal tears still lay scattered across marble floors, catching the light like stars that had finally learned to fall.